He thought that he had won, but one rap later and his life as he knew it was over. It was in October of 2020 that news outlets reported a story surrounding SoundCloud rapper Nuke Bizzle in a tale as morally questionable as it was actually quite funny. But to understand why, we need to go back to the start. Nuke Bizzle, real name Fontrell Antonio Barnes, was a then 31-year-old rapper who had come up with a bit of a scheme. A fraudulent plan that allowed him to steal $1.2 million. He did this by exploiting the pandemic's unemployment assistance provision of the CARES Act, which was designed to expand access to unemployment benefits to the self-employed and gig workers. Essentially, if you guys remember back to 2020, the US government wanted to assist people who were out of work, and so they sent over money to those whose jobs were impacted because of the pandemic. Nuke Bizzle realised that if he could apply to the California Employment Development Department under fake names and stolen identities, he could then claim their benefits. And so he and a few co-conspirators did exactly that. He used fake names, many of which belonged to people who had been the victim of identity theft, in order to apply for EDD debit cards, and then he had the cards sent to addresses in which he had access to within Beverly Hills and Koreatown. So how many times do you guys think he did this successfully? How many EDD debit cards do you think that Nuke Bizzle obtained? Let me know your answer down in the comments, because the actual truth is pretty wild. Let me know down below, because I can now tell you that Nuke Bizzle had access to 92 EDD debit cards that were worth, yet again, $1.2 million, and even though he only ever accessed about $700,000 of this, I mean, it was still a huge takeaway. He was able to defraud the government out of more than $1 million, and he very nearly got away with it too. Nuke Bizzle was on top of the world. There are multiple pictures of him online wearing designer clothes, Gucci belts, seemingly expensive jewelry, holding large sums of cash. And it was at this point, after Nuke Bizzle and everyone else involved had ran the scheme successfully almost 100 times, that it's likely that Nuke Bizzle got a bit cocky. He thought that he had outsmarted everyone, and so in a hilariously unfortunate series of events for him, Nuke Bizzle decided to include how he defrauded the government into his SoundCloud raps. He made a song literally called EDD, once again referring to the Employment Development Department, and in this song, which also has a music video attached to it, he brags about getting rich off EDD. Quote, "I just got rich off EDD, I just woke up to 300 Gs. He'd also give a shout out to then President Donald Trump, while another rapper in the video named Fat Wizzer went on to rap, "You gotta sell cocaine, I just file a claim." And then he ended his verse with, "N, I'm smart, you ain't." Nuke Bizzle was then arrested in Las Vegas 13 days after the song dropped, at which time he had 8 EDD debit cards on his person. Strangely enough, CNN reported that roughly $163 billion of the $872 billion given out during the pandemic was fraudulently given, and so Nuke Bizzle was definitely not alone, but because he snitched on himself during his rap, he was caught and in response was sentenced to 77 months in prison, which is equivalent to more than 6 years behind bars. And of course, he was also made to pay the money back. And that's just one of the many stories I have for you today about SoundCloud's shameless criminal rappers. Still to come, we have a story about a kid who was accused of wanting to harm his school because of his rap lyrics, and a man who made a SoundCloud rap years before he was accused of a quadruple murder in one of the most infamous US true crime cases of the past decade. But to get to those stories, we have to go through this next one. So, as it turns out, Nuke Bizzle wasn't the only SoundCloud rapper to get in trouble during the pandemic. In fact, a rapper named James Potok also found himself flying a bit too close to the sun. James Potok, if you don't know him, was a SoundCloud rapper and prankster who a couple of years ago now was deemed a criminal for saying that he had coronavirus when actually he didn't. What's up with that? Now obviously, there's a bit more to this story than I said. For some context, James Potok was on board a plane to Jamaica to film a rap music video when he claimed to have the coronavirus. Obviously, a plane is a very crammed area, so there's no getting away from someone who's sick if they're within your vicinity. You can't just leave. He thought that it would be funny to say that and take a video of it, and perhaps he thought that the video would go viral. He said, "Can I get everybody's attention please? I just came back from the Hunan province, the capital of the coronavirus. I'm not feeling too well." But though James had anticipated that people would freak out, though he had anticipated that this would be the source of fear, he could have never anticipated that the plane that was flying to Jamaica would turn back around and head back to Toronto, where he's from. He could have never anticipated the plane making an emergency landing, and of course he didn't also expect the crew to then notify the police, who would be there to arrest him when he got off the plane, being escorted off in a mask whilst angry passengers booed the man who ruined their flight. He tried to use the virus to go viral, but ended up walking away in cuffs. Although through a modern lens, it seems a bit ridiculous that they would turn the plane around and go back home where he would be arrested. If you remember that this is set in early 2020, it is a bit more understandable. Back then, we really didn't know how COVID worked. Mass hysteria was rampant, people were running around in hazmat suits, the media was sticking cameras in dying 40-year-olds' faces, telling them to warn the public. In hindsight, whether or not they should have been as much as they were, that's up for debate, but at least when you take the time into context, it's more understandable that the plane passengers would be a bit terrified when they hear that a man who's been to China is now feeling extremely sick. Following this, Potok would make an apology to YouTube in a video that has since been deleted, since if I'm not mistaken, he has deleted his channel. Though if you're looking for it, you can easily find a re-upload. It actually seems as though Potok went silent online after this, as though I found in an article that he allegedly had 30,000 Instagram followers at the time, I couldn't find his Instagram either. His Twitter also dried up in October 2020, a few months after the incident. Now, this could be down to the negative reaction that this prank had, or potentially it could be because he went to court because of the prank, and perhaps part of his sentencing came with the fact that he had to stay offline for a year or two, and he just never came back. I could realistically see that as a possibility, though that is just a theory of mine. In fact, after the initial news coverage back in February 2020, I couldn't find anything online about the repercussions he faced. Though I can't imagine it was anything too severe, anything more than a fine and a slap on the wrist and perhaps an apology seems a bit excessive in my books. But since there are few details on the matter, anything else I say would be nothing more than speculation. But speaking of speculation, much was given over Michael Schmitt's intentions back in 2018. The reason being? Well, many people speculated that this SoundCloud rapper had intentions of shooting up his school. The story goes that it was a crisp day in February when Schmitt decided to write a new rap for SoundCloud. He wanted to express himself creatively with a song titled, "You lil sluts at JCHS, I love you all even though y'all hurt me and I forgive you, I would never hurt you." JCHS, by the way, was a reference to his school, the James Caldwell High School. He wrote all of the lyrics, many of which were very crass and aggressive, but nonetheless he released the song into the ether. But what would happen next would change Michael Schmitt's life forever, as a student at the high school discovered the song and believed their life to potentially be in danger. They reported it to the school, who took immediate action, locking the premises down, and I kid you not, they contacted the authorities, who took the rap so seriously as to send the SWAT team out to tackle the situation. Fortunately, school wasn't on at that time, and though there were a few people on campus, it wasn't like the SWAT team just burst through the windows during science class or anything. But since the incident, both the school and Schmitt have come out to defend their positions. On the side of the school, it's understandable that if there's the slightest fear that Schmitt could potentially be a threat, that the most immediate action should be taken. At the end of the day, safety comes first. We've seen online hints that should have been listened to over and over and over and over again over the past decade, but even before that, though these sorts of shootings have still persisted. And since this incident came just days after a school shooting in Parkland, Florida, which could have been prevented if people would have taken the assailant's social media posts seriously, there's no doubt that for the safety of students and faculty alike, it's better to be safe than sorry in these situations. However, from Schmitt's side, what if they were looking into something that wasn't there? Schmitt was arrested for creating a false public alarm, which reportedly could come along with a 5 to 10 year prison sentence. Let me remind you that all he actually did was create a rap song. To potentially be put behind bars for 5 to 10 years of your life for simply expressing yourself creatively is dystopian and insane. And the lyrics, by the way, weren't anything that we haven't heard before. Apparently he just says "suck my dick" a few times and makes physical violent threats, which isn't exactly new. Apparently one line went, "pull my gun, kill your f***ing head, now you're dead, go to sleep." I mean, they're pretty dead lyrics if you ask me. There's no subtlety, there's no wordplay, there's no nuance, but his lyricism isn't on trial here. At the end of the day, they're just words in a rap song, and so if there's no intention behind them, then it shouldn't even matter. But the only person who knew if there was intention is Schmitt himself, and his case definitely isn't helped by the fact that his SoundCloud profile picture is him posing with a gun pointed towards the camera. He would later lie to the police, saying that the gun in the picture was plastic and he attempted to not give it over to them. However, later inspection found that the gun was in fact real. Being a Brit myself, American gun culture has always been something that somewhat eluded me. Obviously, I know that if you own one, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go and use it for evil intentions. But taking photos with guns like this seems very threatening, and I can understand if students at his school were scared. On top of that, dropping your school's name in a rap featuring violent lyrics is strange, and Schmitt himself was not a perfect student. In the 2 years between 2016 and 2018, it was reported that he had been suspended 10 times minimum, ranging from tamer reasons such as cutting class to more severe incidents such as spitting on classmates and having THC in his system. Additionally, his school's resource officer claimed that in the past, Schmitt had expressed anger towards his school, but wouldn't you too if you had been suspended 10 times? Does that necessarily mean that he had cruel intentions? Schmitt argued that because he's from a small white conservative town in New Jersey, him being a weird kid who's a fan of hip hop made them associate him with a stereotypical view of gangster rappers. He said, "It was like I was guilty the second I posted the song on SoundCloud. They wouldn't let me explain myself." When it comes to rap music, a lot of people associate it with violence, with murder, with vulgarity, and a video such as this detailing criminal rappers is not going to help with that. But of course, not every rapper loves violence, not every rap song has vulgarity, and not every rapper is a criminal. Of course, rap has its bad eggs, probably more than most genres do, and there have been many of its artists that have found themselves trapped within a culture of violence and criminality, but at the same time, when you look around, there have been many other artists from many other genres that have done some very questionable or criminal things in the past, and so many people have found rap to be tarred with an unfair brush. Whether it be a racist thing because rap is often associated with black and Latino culture, or whether it be that the culture of rap itself is more dangerous than other music genres, I am by no means qualified to say. I simply can't weigh in here because I've never studied it. Most people watching this video are going to know way more about rap than I do. I'm an indie fan, I don't really care too much for the genre. But I am qualified to tell you that Schmitt was placed under house arrest because of this. He was barred from using the internet or uploading his songs to SoundCloud, he was barred from contacting members of his high school, he was fired from his job as a UPS package handler, and even had a female member of the school place a restraining order against him for terroristic threats and cyber harassment. Was this the culmination of years of intimidating and threatening behaviour by Schmitt, or was it all just an overreaction? Hysteria targeted towards a young man who wanted to do nothing else than creatively express himself through song. As far as I could find online, there was no update from Michael Schmitt after June of 2018, so I can't tell you the result of his trial, even if I doubt that he received the 5+ years that were possible. Unless the police found evidence of a planned attack, I can't think there's much of a case here. Now, talking about SoundCloud's criminals would be virtually impossible without mentioning the infamous Tay-K, a man not much older than me, with a rap sheet about as long as the script for this video. I already covered Tay-K's crimes before in a video that I made about banned Spotify artists, and to be honest, I don't really have too much more to say on the matter, nothing too much has changed. So instead of spending hours writing, recording, and editing the exact same stuff into this video, I thought it would make sense to edit that portion into this one, alongside more of a focus on his SoundCloud career. So if I'm hopping between this background and another one, don't be alarmed or anything, I'm not teleporting all over the place, that scene was just recorded a few months ago. So with that said, Tay-K emerged on the SoundCloud scene back in 2014 as part of a rap group named the Daytona Boys, alongside rappers Pimpies and Santana Sage. It's fair to say that the group never really gained too much traction, still to this day only having 4,000 followers, but in fairness, for Tay-K, who would have only been about 14 when this group was made, these were solid foundations. He would take things a step further in 2015 after he began releasing solo music, picking up a bit of traction in the local area, but this would be nothing compared to the success that he would find later on. Though the means of how he acquired that success are very disturbing to say the least, and they start with his criminal activities. Now, sources vary on the details, but the most common story that I've seen is that Tay-K, real name Tamar McIntyre, conspired with a 19 and 20-year-old named Megan Holt and Ariana Barrett respectively to rob a 19-year-old named Zachary Bellowait. The plan was that the girls were going to seduce the young man and then go back to his place, where they would leave the door unlocked, letting people into the house to rob it. However, when this came to happen, Bellowait was in the house at the time with his friend Ethan Walker. Tay-K, the apparent orchestrator, had recruited gunmen Lotharian Merritt and Sean Robinson, as well as others, to enact this drug and money theft. But things went horribly wrong after these hired men shot both Zachary and Ethan. Zachary was allegedly hit in the head with brass knuckles and shot in the shoulder, but would survive. Ethan, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky and was shot whilst his hands were in the air, his girlfriend testified. This, unfortunately, would prove fatal for Ethan. Tay-K was only 16 at the time of this shooting, but once the news broke, disturbingly, it massively helped his rap career. He was placed under house arrest, but in March 2017, he removed his ankle monitor and tweeted, "F*** this house arrest shit, they gonna have to catch me." He fled from Texas to New Jersey, but in June 2017 was recaptured and accused of beating and robbing a 65-year-old man and murdering a 23-year-old while on the run. He also made a music video for his song The Race in this time, and this leads us to 2018 when he was removed from Spotify's public playlists for a short time, but after the death of the hateful conduct policy a few weeks later, he's since been accepted back into the fold. But it probably doesn't matter too much anyway, because in July 2019, he was found guilty of murder for his part in the 2016 robbery. He was sentenced to 55 years in prison and is still awaiting trial for the charge against the 23-year-old victim he's said to have murdered whilst out on the run. So it's unlikely that the rapper will ever see the outside world again. The same thing could be said for Bryan Kohberger in the most disturbing story that we have today. For this next story, viewer discretion is advised because things are about to get very dark. If you don't recognise the name of Bryan Kohberger, you might recognise the crime that he's said to have committed. In November 2022, there were 4 university students in Idaho who were fatally stabbed, those being Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Zana Knodel, and Ethan Chapin. The crime was blasted all over the news. It was absolutely devastating that it happened, and for the local community, it was terrifying. This was the first murder case in Moscow, Idaho for 7 years, and for a time, it seemed as if the assailant would get away with it, as it wasn't until the 30th of December, more than a month and a half since the crime took place, that a suspect would be placed into handcuffs, that being Bryan Kohberger. Even though this channel does deal with heavy and disturbing subject matter, I would by no means classify this as a true crime channel. The emotional weight and burden of having to discuss people who have been murdered or worse is simply too much for me to bear, especially when it comes to 4 university students who were around my age who had their entire lives ahead of them. I just can't do it. So for that reason, I'm not going to go into details about how the crime is thought to have played out, but I do want to take a look at Bryan Kohberger specifically, because as you might expect in a video titled SoundCloud's Criminal Rappers, this man actually uploaded content to SoundCloud, or at least it's thought. Reports of his SoundCloud career broke in January of this year after the New York Post uncovered a profile on the website believed to belong to the alleged murderer. He went under the username XR, and the song uncovered was named Rise Up Instrumental Test. This song includes some noteworthy lyrics such as, "You are not my equal, you are evil, but I'm devil," and "I'm a pacifist, like afraid to get a bloody fist." The reason that we believe Kohberger is XR is that the username is also a part of a personal email of his. This username seems to be quite unique, and so although not confirmed, it seems quite likely. But perhaps the most chilling thing of all of this is that his alleged rap is still out there on the internet. The XR account is still up on SoundCloud, and someone's even re-uploaded the song to YouTube. It's chilling to hear this music because we know that if he is in fact guilty, we're listening to a man who would go on to commit some of the worst acts a human could do. What happens next to Kohberger, whether he actually committed the crime that he's accused of, and whether he deserves to be featured in a video about SoundCloud's criminal rappers is yet to be seen as of June 2023. But this story is relatively unknown. I don't think I've seen anyone make a video about it yet, and so I thought I'd bring it to you. But if Bryan Kohberger is in fact guilty, that would surely make him be the most shameless criminal rapper that SoundCloud has ever seen. It really is a shame to leave things on such a bum note, but that's all we have time for in this video, so if you enjoyed it, please make sure to subscribe. I am unbearably close to 100k, I'm like 3,000 away, so please, from the depths of my soul, subscribe. I also just started channel memberships, and I thought it'd be a good idea to mention it at the end of this video. It's not going to change anything from a viewer's perspective, and please by no means feel obliged to sign up or anything, it's just a way that you could help support me if you want to. But another easy way is by checking out another one of my videos, so if you enjoyed this and you care for the dark side of the music industry, why not check out my video on banned Spotify artists? It's an amazing video, if I do say so myself, so aside from that, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.